One of the greatest queens to rule England in history was the final Tudor monarch Elizabeth I. Her people became known as Elizabethans, and her country saw a huge burst of culture as men such as Shakespeare were writing their best works and performing them inside of the hustle and bustle of London. But Elizabeth I was best known for her victories, being known as Gloriana. She was someone who managed to defeat the Spanish Armada, the most feared fleet of the time, with success thanks to help from the great British weather. She also had her cousin Mary Queen of Scots executed because of the threat she posed to her throne while she was alive. The people of England greatly loved Elizabeth I. However, in 1603 she died, and the nation were heartbroken. The Queen became very depressed and down in her final months, as her friends had died, and she became very lonely. But some historians have pointed at her own makeup being the cause of the Queen's death, and that she may have suffered with blood poisoning caused by the thick white makeup that she wore. But what is the story with this, and did makeup kill Queen Elizabeth I? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. In 1603, Queen Elizabeth I was a relatively old woman. People did not live too long during the Tudor period or during the 16th and 17th centuries, and Elizabeth I was suffering, as she thought that the younger people of the country saw her as an old and outdated person, and she thought they wanted a new, fresher monarch. She got very paranoid, depressed and bitter towards some of her closest companions. As mentioned, many of her best friends and longest-serving companions died, and this added to the Queen's distressed mindset. But even in her final years, she had her former favourite Robert Devereux executed inside of the Tower of London, and he had plotted a rebellion against her, and this showed how the final Tudor Queen would not stop to stomp her authority on those who crossed the line and rose up against her. By the winter of 1602, it was obvious that Elizabeth I was becoming ill, and she was getting poorly. Some had said that she caught a cold whilst walking in the winter air, and she also, at the time, complained about having a sore throat. She had aches and pains, and at times would refuse to see a doctor. She also would just simply sit aimlessly on her cushions on the floor, deep in thought, contemplating her life, and she became convinced that she would not go to heaven, but in fact hell, because she executed another queen, Mary Queen of Scots. She was relatively fed up of living, and she was ready to accept her own death and demise, and with this she then went downhill very quickly. In her final days, the Archbishop of Canterbury was summoned to the bedchambers of the Queen in Richmond Palace, and he kept her company as she slipped in and out of consciousness. He promised her that she would, in heaven, rule a kingdom again, and that she would not be punished for defending her crown. Elizabeth, in her final hours, gave up talking and just squeezed the hands of those around her to say that she was still there, and her ladies took vigils around her bedside, and in the morning of the 24th of March 1603, Queen Elizabeth I died within her bedchambers. The people of London were informed of her death, and there was a great shock and also upset, as most could not remember someone else ruling over them, and Elizabeth I had ruled for many decades. She left specific instructions as to what should happen to her body after her death, and she did not want to be embalmed or have her heart and other vital organs removed from her body. But the physicians who prepared Elizabeth I's body ignored this request, and they cut into her body, they took out her heart, her entrails and other organs, and then they stuffed her chest cavity with spices in an attempt to keep away decay from her mortal remains. They then wrapped her body in a thick cerecloth and then placed her inside of a very heavy lead-lined coffin ready for her burial. But there has been a huge amount of debate over the centuries as to what killed Queen Elizabeth I and what her cause of death actually was. There was no post-mortem investigation that took place. When her organs were removed, no one noted anything different or out of the ordinary. For example, when her half-brother, Edward VI, died and was embalmed, there was a significant mass found on his lung, which was put down as his cause of death. This was not noted for Elizabeth I, but one massive theory that has developed over the years is that Queen Elizabeth I could have been killed by the makeup that she wore so much of on her face over the years. Her makeup was very important to her, and it may have contributed to her death. She wore this for a number of reasons. Firstly, in her late 20s, Elizabeth contracted smallpox, and this deadly disease left her with bad scars on her face, and she was rather self-conscious because of this, and she covered them up with makeup. But at the time, wearing a very thick face of white makeup was very fashionable. But this was troublesome. At the time, the makeup was known as the spirits of Saturn, and when this was applied on the skin, it gave the appearance that the Queen had a smoother and paler skin, but sometimes this makeup would not be removed. It was intended to last for many days, sometimes even a week, and it was not taken off before bed. The makeup was very dangerous, and the main ingredient of it was in fact lead. Lead was used at the time as a weapon to poison, and of course it consumed. This could lead to lead poisoning and then death. During Elizabeth I's reign, no one knew about the dangers of lead as an ingredient, and that the makeup that was being used could have been the cause of many wealthy people's deaths. The toxins caused by the makeup would have, over time, infiltrated the Queen's cells and blood, and could have contributed to her death. Elizabeth I did not just wear the full face of white makeup that was dangerous. She also wore lipstick and red rouge on her face, and this was said to have also contained mercury, another compound and material that could cause terrible poisoning. In fact, to even remove the makeup that she wore on her face, a mercury solution was needed to take it off, causing even more chances for the Queen to be poisoned. The poison makeup theory is a very prominent one, and when considering her symptoms in her final days, it does add further weight to it. There have been other suggestions that the final Tudor Queen died from cancer, as there would have been no way to treat this at the time, and tumours would not have been able to have been removed from the body safely. There were no tumours noted on her organs when the embalming process was taking place, so it could have been slightly discounted. She may have also contracted pneumonia from the cold that she had, and that this is the large rooms of her palace got worse as the damp set in during the cold winters also. But Elizabeth I was an old woman, and she may have simply died from old age, and the fact she was in a sense willing death to come and take her. She was struggling mentally in her final months, and she did not really want to get better. She gave up her fight to live any longer. She had seen lots of her friends die, and many of these people had been with her since she was a child. She was also troubled by many regrets in life, and stressed by the fact she was not in a position to name an immediate successor and continue the Tudor dynasty, as she chose not to marry or have children. But she knew her final illness would have been her last. Because there was no post-mortem investigation thoroughly carried out upon the body of Queen Elizabeth I, it leads us to speculate what actually killed the final Tudor Queen. The theory about lead poisoning or mercury poisoning caused by the makeup she wore is a prominent and strong one, and it would have over time certainly damaged her health and done Elizabeth I more harm than good. She was buried after her death inside of Westminster Abbey, under a huge tomb which was commissioned by her successor, the Scottish King James I, who Elizabeth accepted as her successor in her final days. So that unanswered question is, did makeup kill Queen Elizabeth I? Thank you for watching, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And again, thank you so much for watching.